I wish I could tell everybody that this was a happy video. I really do. I really do. No, but you see the title, and I'm gonna confirm it on camera because today, or I should say tonight, whenever this video comes out, who cares? I'm doing this for the fans of the movie and why I think it's darker. So, without a further ado, let us talk about, or well, let me talk about why a certain movie named Chronicle. And we're going to be talking about the director's cut, lost footage, found footage edition, the extended version. And if you can see there, I didn't notice that before, but that looks like a wolf in the black, and that looks like a face or a skull. A bit creepy, but just did realize that. Huh. Okay then. So let us talk about why this movie is darker than you think. And as it may be one of my favorite found footage movies, I want to quickly go ahead and say that this will contain some spoilers of the movie, just letting all of you know. So, why is Chronicle darker? Number one, we have the main protagonist, Andrew Detmer, played by Dane DeHaan. And in the movie, we start off with him looking through his camera and testing it out while being taunted angrily by his dad, who is drunk, and he kicks his door telling Andrew to open the door, but he taunts back at him and he didn't like that. So after that scene's done, we're introduced to another main character, Matt Garrity, played by Alex Russell. So, he even asks why Andrew even has the camera to begin with. And Andrew replies with that he is filming things. And then Matt pretty much tries to annoy Andrew with one of his songs that he plays on the radio after he said alright. And it turns out to be a very funny moment in the movie. But Chronicle is not meant for being funny. Oh, no, 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 no. No, 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 no. You have no idea. So after he's done singing his song, I'm not here to explain the full movie, I'm just saying why it's darker, which is why I technically have to explain, so please be patient. They're done singing the song in that scene, and we go to where now they're at school. Then we soon learn that Matt likes to sit back and smoke the big one, and Matt told Andrew to go inside the school, and so he did. But Andrew said before he went in the school, he says you're gonna miss first period, and Matt says I'm just gonna sit back for a bit, meaning that he's getting high off his ass. So as we go forward into the school, Andrew is awkwardly filming his school, and there's all these votes for Steve, which is played by Michael B. Jordan. He is played by Michael B. Jordan. Sorry about that. Had to think for a minute. Which is, yeah, cool. So, we have all the main characters and who they're played by. Perfect. But things take a turn for the worst in a few, as Andrew is soon bullied by by the bullies in the school that like to taunt him, and it pretty much makes Andrew a little bit mad. And then Andrew's taunted at by having the bully has the camera and puts it on the ground and kicks it over to Andrew because they think it's funny to break other people's things. After that, he's found on the school bleachers while recording, and that he's filming while eating his lunch. He says that's even where he goes to eat, which actually sounds pretty cool. But then Andrew picks up the camera and starts filming again. A girl comes over and says it's really creepy, and Andrew was trying to pretend that he was not filming. And after that, we are met with the local thugs of where he lives at. And one of them says, "Do not film me, Detmer. Don't film me, Detmer." And again, Andrew was trying to shrug it off as that he wasn't. And he feels the fear inside of him. So he runs home. Hours pass by and we learn that Andrew has a light to put on his camera. Cool. Very cool. And he's found satisfied by it, turning it on and off a couple of times while listening to his recordings that he does on his computer, which is why the movie is called Chronicle. Because you get it. But Andrew was not paying attention to his computer, so he accidentally forgot that he left his door open, and he tries to close everything quick on his computer because his dad walks in, and Andrew just pretty much asked him, "What do you want?" And then Andrew, this is when it gets a bit dark, so if you are not okay with abuse for what I'm about to explain, which I'm not, I have experienced a few things of that. I'm not going to tell you. That's my personal business, not yours. But after Andrew says, "What do you want?" to his own father, calmly, not even angrily, just calmly, Andrew is smacked on the face and grabbed by the hand, and as Andrew gets angry, he's trying to fight back, but then his dad throws him against the wall. Because he's an abusive piece of crap that we wish we haven't seen. The actor does a phenomenal job, they all do, but it's the character of what I'm talking about. After that, we are properly now introduced to the main antagonist of the story, Richard Detmer, Andrew's father. He leans over his chair as Andrew's on the ground and taunts him some more and tells him to finish his homework. And, oh, I forgot. Matt was talking about a party that Andrew could go to because he's a senior in high school. So, there's that. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because, number one, I almost forgot, that's important. Number two, here's why. Andrew gets up after his dad leaves his room, and he is thinking about going to the party of what his cousin Matt Garrity said to him, and to just have some fun. Alright, cool. Andrew goes to the party with Matt, and when they get there, he tells him to go do his own thing and have a beer. But Andrew says, "Matt, I don't drink." And this whole scene is cool until a few moments. So now, he's just filming a bunch of stuff, filming the party for fun, and just pretty much by his own being alone, looks like he's having a blast with his camera and stuff. And then we're introduced to a character called Casey. Or Katie. I forgot her name because I hate her so much. You'll learn out why soon. Yeah, it's Casey. Yeah, so anyways, we're introduced to Casey now. And she films for her blog. And she tries to get Andrew's attention a few times and then physically goes up to him and just says hello. And they can't really hear each other what they're saying, but as the audience, we can. So, after that's done, Matt comes and searches for Andrew and then sees Casey and talks to her about how life is pointless and stuff like that. Pretty much the same thing he said to Andrew about giving up on life. And that was his question before this entire incident I'm about to tell all of you. And then Matt said yes. So then, back at the barn party at night, at the rave I should say, Matt is pretty much told off by both Casey and Andrew because Matt claims to be not philosophical and stuff like that. And he was trying to act cool, but this is one of Matt's douchebag number one parts. He calls the barn party lame and Casey says why, and then he goes about on philosophical. And then Casey just goes and blogs for her blog and leaves Matt and Andrew. And then Andrew says, "What do young think about glow sticks?" And then Matt gives him the finger. Okay, so now we're having a good time at this barn party where there's a rave now. And so now, a few minutes later, this guy comes up to Andrew like he's some tough big guy, but clearly he's not. But this is foreshadowing. I wish I could tell you in my own opinion that this was not foreshadowing. I really, really do. So, the guy comes down from the stage and says, "Are you filming my girlfriend?" Andrew claims that he says no, but he slips up and then he says that he's just filming. I want to count that as Andrew accidentally slipping up, saying after he said no and that he was just filming. And then the guy gets angry and starts cussing at him, saying to break his nose and stuff like that. And then the guy aggressively throws water on the camera and spits on Andrew. And then we go out a few minutes later now, where I could only guess Andrew was spending a few hours at outside, and feeling sad and crying, he cleans off the camera. But then we're introduced to Michael B. Jordan's character, Steve. And Steve is absolutely a nice guy. Definitely, hands down. He comes up and is looking for somebody named Andrew, who we already know because Matt told him about that he has a camera is what I could think of because Matt's already waiting somewhere. And so the two catch up with each other. Steve calms Andrew down and introduces himself as Steve. And Andrew says he already knows because he wasn't trying to be rude there, in my opinion, because he was posted everywhere as president of the school club and whatever. Anyways, that's why that's like that. So then what happens is they start walking through the woods after Steve said that a bunch of people and Matt found this crazy hole and were obsessed with it. So then they go walking through the woods and they catch up, and then Steve actually remembers who Andrew is because he was in shop class with him. He couldn't remember at the time when Andrew was crying because he was trying to calm him down, in my opinion. And then he remembered who Andrew Detmer really was. But then Andrew and Steve walking for like, I'd say, 8 minutes. So I don't know. I don't really count the walking time. But Steve does kindly ask a few minutes later if the camera has a light, and Andrew says yes, it does. And he turns it on, and then they go to a hole in the ground where things could be cool. It is pretty cool. But anyways, the reason why I say that is because Andrew was freaking out and trying to ask Steve what the hole was. And Matt's already down there. So they go down there and they listen, and the sound coming out of the hole after they listen a little bit good is messing with the camera. Now, here's where I want to say some foreshadowing, because this is heavy foreshadowing, and they should have listened. And as they were going deeper and deeper into the hole, before that, Steve goes down there and Andrew screams his name, feeling concerned. And then Matt decides to go down there, and he doesn't listen to Andrew. The both of them didn't listen. They said, don't. He said, don't go in the hole, and that Matt was also his ride home. So what happens next is that they discover this really strange rock in the ground, this really weird crystal that when Steve touched it, it activated, it glowed blue, and then it glowed red, and then our characters are sent off out of the hole, not knowing what happened. But it was also messing with the camera. Now, we catch up with our three main characters a few days later, or it might have just been one day ago, because they were already talking about what powers they had. They do a ball test, and Andrew tells Steve and Matt where to stand, and then they do upper hands and stuff like that. And this is actually a pretty nice, comforting, and funny moment, in my opinion. But remember what I said, Chronicle is not known for being happy or funny. No. So anyways, continuing onwards. Matt is pretty much up next. I should say who was up next and who took some more damage. I'll count this as damage. So Steve was ready, and he throws the ball at Matt, and Matt gets angry, saying you were doing underhand, and then Steve said that's what he was doing. So Matt takes damage for 1 point. However, for Steve, it's Matt's turn to throw the ball next, and he throws it across, and it hits Steve up the chin, damaging him for 8 points of health. Also, our characters all start out at 30 health. So 8 points of health. Now that it's Andrew's turn, Steve is telling Matt to beam him, as they all, by the way, take turns holding the camera. a new camera, because we'll get to it later. But a new camera that works better than ever. When Matt throws the ball at Andrew, he stops it really quick before it can even hit his face. But then we are indicated by nosebleeds. So if they use their power too much, they get a nosebleed because their head starts to hurt from using their power. I don't remember how much he was bleeding, but Andrew loses 6 points of life, pretty much. Now then, now that they did that, later onwards, they are talking to each other and having a good time. And I'll pretty much get this part out of the way pretty quick, but later on in the movie, Andrew mentions that they should take it out of the backyard, meaning that all the ball tests and stuff. So, what they do is they go to a convenience store, a toy store, and stuff like that, where people buy their toys from or whatever. It's a pretty cool part, in my opinion. So they're messing around in there, and then they get out of there, and then this poor woman that gets her car moved, Steve tells them to watch this, because I'll say why in a minute. Steve moves this woman's car to another part in a parking lot at a grocery store, and later on they are having a blast, and the woman is trying to look for her car and she can't find it. So, with that being said, Matt starts laughing. They all do, because they're pretty much picking on her about not finding her car. And Matt says they're just morbids, and then starts to have a giggle fit. But then, a few minutes later, cutting into Matt's car again, after they tested their powers out in public for the first time, Andrew tells Steve to hold the camera while this guy is beeping his horn at Matt's car. And this is probably one of the coolest scenes in the whole movie, because it works so well. And I'm gonna say this. This car, he puts his hands like this and says abracadabra. And the car goes off the road into a river down some trees. Breaks one of those side metal things on the on the road. And he, in my opinion, I don't think he even meant to do that so aggressively, but again, why would you think about trying to do that in the first place? Anyways, the guy that was pushed down there gets saved by Steve and Matt calls the cops, and then Matt explains later on at that night that Andrew hurt somebody and told him, "How do you feel?" This makes Andrew feel a little bit sad, because he didn't mean to do that. And then Matt declares rules about using it in public, and especially don't use it when you're angry. The next day, we cut to Andrew's room as he's pretty much pretending to hold the camera and stuff like that. Oh yeah, I forgot the restaurant scene, by the way. The restaurant scene was actually pretty funny. Because of the stuff they do. I can't explain all of it, but if you want to go see all the deleted scenes, go ahead and watch it for yourself. But that's when the car scene comes up. Sorry, I forgot about that. Anyways, back to where I am. Andrew's pretending like he's holding his camera, learning new ways of how to use this new power, known as telekinesis. Yeah, that's a very strong power. And I want to cut like a few hours later into the movie, by the way, because I don't want this video to be too long. So, I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to spoil everything, but I am going to say this. At one point in the movie, Andrew starts to feel sad because Steve told him that he can use his powers and pretend that he's a magician at the talent show, which is my favorite part in the movie, by the way. The talent show scene is very, very cool. Go ahead and go check it out, or the full movie at that point. And also remember, we're talking about the extended cut, not the theatrical cut, by the way. So, pretty much a few hours later, Andrew becomes a VIP at this, what I want to say is one of Steve's other friends' house or whatever. Because he doesn't describe it as his house. But Andrew is overwhelmed with excitement and enjoyment about how huge the house is and stuff like that. And then we get into the house and Steve and Matt are just chilling, and then Andrew gets a girl known as Monica to talk to him, and also that's Dane DeHaan's wife, by the way, which I think was really cool. But I'm not going to say more than that, other than that was Dane DeHaan's wife, and phenomenal choice. But again, I don't know if they were husband and wife at the time, so I'm just going to keep my boundaries with me, okay? Anyways, afterwards, after he's talking to Monica, he sets the camera on the table and he drinks, which, remember when I said that he says he doesn't drink? Foreshadowing. Very, very heavy foreshadowing. Alright, so now that we're done talking about that, Monica spots beer ping pong. I don't really know the name of it, but I know what it is. So she tries to tell Andrew over and over that you could be good at that, and Andrew agrees. He uses his power to impress Andrew. No, sorry. He uses his power to impress Monica and does it twice, and that he pretty much scored. So now, a few hours later into the party, things were going great. And Matt is looking for Andrew, and Steve tells him that he's upstairs with Monica, trying to get it on pretty much. Remember that for a moment. And the camera, Matt decides to blog himself after talking to Steve, and he pretty much tells him that he's happy and that his life is looking up for the better. Matt accidentally bumps into somebody and spears beer on them, and he tells them that he's sorry. And then we're met with Casey again. For like a lot of times, Casey's is in a lot of scenes. So we're met with Casey again, and she realizes that Matt is drunk, and because of the way he was talking, and that you want to get out of here and stuff like that and go to my house. Pretty much what he was saying, if you get what I was talking about. So then he tells her that he has to drop off the camera to Steve, and then we are brought to Steve, and Steve is pretty much saying like the nicest things in the world, that he's scared and it's about time that Andrew Detmer becomes a man and stuff like that. It's like a butterfly coming out of its cocoon and stuff like that. But we soon learned that Andrew drank too much and he vomits all over Monica. And then, because of the household that Andrew was raised in, this next part he takes the wrong way entirely. Not understanding it, by the way. So, he sees that Andrew is upset, and he's trying to pretty much say that, oh, you vomited all over my jacket, because Andrew borrowed a suit for the talent show, and that's what he was wearing. He was trying to mess around with him, but it makes Andrew more angrier and angrier, because Andrew doesn't understand comedy talk, as I can call it right now. So then he tells Steve to get out over and over, and it gets so aggressive. This is when it gets a little bit more deeper in the story. The funny ha-has of the story and the happiness, you can throw that out the window right now. A few days later, or at least I like to call it that, because of the power that Andrew learned that he can do. So 1 day or 2 days later, take it how you will, Andrew's in his room and he rips a spider apart without even trying. And then we hear that Andrew's mom, Karen Detmer, is in pain, in more pain, because of the medication she's low on, and she can barely breathe. I couldn't even imagine how that feels. Now, getting to this part at hand, while Andrew is trying to look for his dad, he's trying to look for Richard, but he's snooping around in his room and he finds his camera, and him and Andrew some hours later have a talk about that Andrew was being selfish, when really it was actually Richard being selfish, because you're snooping around in your son's room. Asshole. But it gets, oh boy. This next part, they talk about what Richard saw on the camera, and if he would have paid much closer attention of the words I'm about to say, he says to Andrew that, I found what's on your camera. Andrew then replies with, what did you see? And then Richard replies with, just you being a loser. Trying to bring his son down and make him more frustrated and angrier. It works. It really does. Because then they talk about how Richard has to pay for Karen's medication and about school, and then Andrew gets angry and really, really aggressive, because Richard says that he has to pay for his school, and Andrew even says school with a question mark. He said that he goes to a public school and that you don't pay for a public school, you idiot. And then silence fills the room. And Richard starts to get aggressive. He gets Andrew to stand up, throws the table to the side of the room along with the chairs. And because Andrew taught us earlier something in the diner scene that I was talking about was like a barrier, I think that's what he was trying to do, or at least overpower his dad. What happens next is that when Richard says, you called me idiot, huh? Andrew thinks in my head, this is what I'm thinking anyway, that other, like, he was trying to have a barrier, or he thought he was going to get slapped again. No, and this time his dad punches him to the ground and pretty much is trying to manhandle him and saying to get up. And because I heard this in my last watch through of Chronicle, you can hear Richard say once Andrew's up and that they're tackling each other, you can hear him say die. And then Andrew talks about how strong he is after he pushes Richard to the wall and pushes him up further and further, and talking about that he could basically kill him. In other words, he says, I could crush you, you know that? And then he throws Richard across the room. The next thing that happens is Andrew goes to check to see if his dad is still stunned by being thrown on the ground. And I couldn't imagine that hurting, but you had that coming. This is when the movie gets darker. So, he sees that his dad is stunned and he brings the camera towards him to check if he had a bruise on him because his face starts to hurt. And sure enough, he does have a bruise on his face. And this is when I like to think that Andrew is getting corrupted by the power. So, we catch on to Matt and Casey a few hours later, and she sees that Matt's nose is bleeding, and that Matt says he's okay, and then Matt's phone rings, and Casey says that's probably Steve. He ignores the call. So then he messes around with Casey instead, and I can't say what actually happens on the, like, they're just messing around, that's all. He takes Casey's camera, and I can't say what happens in that scene. Nothing really bad happens, it's just meant to be like another funny scene, and it kind of is in a way. But at the same time, knowing what's going to happen is not. So, after that, Andrew is crying in the clouds above, and then not Matt, sorry. And there's thunder and electricity. So now Steve goes up there to try to talk to him, but Andrew keeps getting angrier and angrier, telling him to leave him alone and to stop talking to him. Eventually, Matt... Why do I keep saying Matt? It's because we've been focused on his character for a while, too. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Eventually, Andrew does actually start to insult Steve. And they have a talk for a minute, but it just gets worse. And you can't really hear what Steve is saying because Andrew is trying to say for him to leave now. He wasn't asking him to leave, he was telling him forcefully to leave. But once Steve is in the middle of something that he was talking of, he looks over to his left and gets struck by a lightning bolt by Andrew, killing him. It was an accident, though. But you still killed your best friend. Alright, so now Steve is dead and we're at his funeral, and I never thought about this until now, but I've always thought, I'm always thinking now that Andrew records everything at the funeral about what's happening and stuff like that. And he sees Matt very angry. Instead of crying, he looks over to Andrew in a very angry way. A few hours later go by, and Andrew is filming graves, and even Matt compliments on this. Filming graves? I don't get it. And then he asks why is Andrew not returning his calls. And Andrew says, I just don't feel like talking. But before that, he says, I've been busy. And then after that, he says that he just doesn't feel like talking. Matt tells him to turn off the camera, but Andrew says no. Matt then talks to Andrew about why would Steve be out in the middle of a field during a lightning storm with no recorded lightning strikes. And then they get aggressive with each other about Matt's trying to turn off the camera, but Andrew says to get off of me and don't turn off the camera. They start then talking, and Matt realizes that Andrew has a problem with himself. He's obsessed with recording everything he can. And then they try to talk. Well, Matt screams, why won't you just tell me what happened, Andrew? And then he runs away, or I should say he flies away, and grabs the camera in the air, and then he is crying one night. Then the next day he goes to Steve's grave and says that he is sorry and to please believe him. And he says, this thing is just becoming a part of me now. And he says, I miss you, Steve. We then go to a deleted scene. Remember, the extended version. So this is a very awesome foreshadowing scene, as I saw out in my last watch through. Andrew goes back to the hole at some point that day and realizes and sees again that it's all closed up, and he looks down at it, and I think he could feel the crystals or the orbs energy going through him to get even more powerful, because his camera goes in the air and there's a big giant spiral leading towards the hole and showing you how out of control Andrew is getting. So, after the camera comes down to Andrew, he makes a very evil face. Next up, he's eating alone on the bleachers the next day. And when Andrew gets a chant, the bully named Wayne, Andrew screams, hey Wayne, and does this and pulls out Wayne's teeth, leaving Wayne stunned and probably needing a lot of dentist operations. I don't actually really know what happens when you get your teeth pulled out. In my opinion, that part is a very disgusting part, and it's a very other dark part, showing you how darker the story's getting. Because now Andrew is in the bathroom counting the teeth and says how he got it. And then Andrew, the following day, I would believe, anyway, he says that there's this thing about the apex predator and that there's animals are stronger and stuff like that. And he says, I just really think that means something. I just really means something. Well, he's implying there, and sorry that I got tongue-tied, but I do know the line, but while explaining, not right now. But I really just think that means something is what he says twice. And then he puts his right arm out, and without looking at this car that he's in this junkyard, he crushes the car completely. Okay, talk about him turning crazy now. The following night, he's looking at his chronicled recording. And during this, he gets up to go get his mom's medication. Okay. And then Matt comes in, and him and Andrew have an argument because Andrew left his window open. And Matt comes to his house to talk about what happened at school, but things go so far to where they were pushing and shoving each other after Andrew was done and told him to get out of his life. And then Matt tries to punch Andrew, but he can't because it's like a force field blocking him, and he slowly looks at his fist and his face, and then Matt leaves the house, frustrated. And now that Andrew checks on his mom, he leans her over on the bed and puts the blanket on her as you hear the word come out of her mouth saying, "I can't breathe." Very slowly. It's very sad. The next day, with another extended footage scene, we see Richard talking to somebody, and a car goes by, and he looks up at Andrew's room, and Andrew gets away from the window quickly while recording his own dad going into his car. Don't know where he went. Probably to buy more beer, right, Richard? Yeah, that's probably what you're doing instead of getting your wife's medication. So what does Andrew do at a time of desperate state? Well, he grabs his father's equipment because he used to be a fireman. And now at his own house, he just collects the insurance and the bills and stuff like that. It's what Andrew said earlier before the point we're at right now. So he grabs his father's fireman suit and puts it on while listening to David Bowie. The next thing he does, as he's all ready, he goes up to the local thugs that I mentioned earlier. And this part is really brutal because you learn what happens after this scene I'm going to talk about. Andrew says to them to give them their money or else, and they think it's Andrew under there since he has his backpack on, but because of the mask, they can't tell if it's Andrew. Andrew points out a gun, and the thugs are all laughing, and one of them says, "You got a gat?" "Well, I got a gat too," and he was about to say the B word. But before he could do that, Andrew did this. Pretty much shot him over to a tree and killed him. We don't see Andrew throw the next thug, but we do see that he's already been thrown onto a car and he is dead. The next one, Andrew is kind of stumbling and he punches one of the other thugs to the ground, and as soon as the thug hits the ground, he hits the pavement so hard on his head that he's dead. And then Andrew jumps up in the air and kills the last thug, getting their money. And in the next scene, after he's done getting their money and grabs the camera, we see him counting the money, and that it's pretty much not enough because he went to the pharmacy earlier and called the person a douchebag. A douchebag, sorry. Water break. Make sure to drink plenty of water. It's really healthy for you. So, that's what led him to steal these people's money. He's going all about it in the worst way possible, though. However, since Andrew has collected the money, and he's disappointed by how much the thugs actually had, he is trying to think of something else, a new idea to get more money. While we hear ambulances and cops in the distance because Andrew flew away from that area. This time, At night sometime, there's a gas station, and Andrew goes to said gas station and enters in with his camera, and he punches this poor man across the wall with his power, showing you how really powerful he really is now. This next part is just So he punches the cashier of the gas station, and you can actually see Andrew's camera following him while he's using his telekinetic power. So he opens up the cash register and tells it to come on, and zips up his backpack and runs away, still zipping it up and putting it on his back. We see the cashier get up with a shotgun from the camera of the gas station, and then the cashier jumps out as Andrew puts his backpack on. The cashier screams the word "hey," and since Andrew was already mad enough, he threw the shotgun towards a very giant flammable tank, and the shotgun goes off, killing the cashier, lighting him on fire, and then Andrew is lit on fire while still alive, but falls unconscious. And then some hours later, Richard goes to see Andrew, and if it's your first time watching, you think, oh, he actually cares for him. Because now that we see that cops are all out of Andrew's, his room that Andrew is in, surveillancing him with Andrew's own camera to see what happens. Well, let me tell you, it's not pretty. So, now that we have a bunch of that out of the way, let's talk about another thing. Once Andrew is in the hospital and you first see him, he's got bruises and scars all over him, and he's unconscious on his bed, and his right hand is handcuffed to the bed. However, when Richard gets in there, he was just worried about saying this: your mother is dead. So by that point, Karen ran out of oxygen and suffocated to death. And he stated that he was trying to go out looking for Andrew while he was screwing around. And Andrew was not screwing around, he was doing very bad things. Because he believes that he's the apex predator now. So, this leads to him slowly awaking and pretending to be asleep. And this next part, Richard is angry at Andrew because why not? That's his character. And he calls Andrew selfish and to sit up and look at me. And then after Richard says, you did this, the camera of the room kind of cuts out Richard's audio because I think it wasn't a thing said for a PG-13 movie. And yes, this movie is rated PG-13. But we slowly see the camera holder and Andrew's camera go towards him, meaning that Andrew is just pretty much awake now. After Richard said your mother is dead, that's pretty much what triggered him. He has broken. Andrew has broken. And so then Richard says, do you hear me? Your mother is dead and it's your fault. But before Richard can lay a hand on Andrew, his eye opens and looks at him and grabs his arm, and exploding his entire half of the room. We're then cut to a birthday sequence where Matt and Casey are at because of local relatives, and Matt's nose starts bleeding, and he's saying to Casey, "How can you not hear that? It's really loud." Because he thinks that Casey hears it too. And then we go to the local news to where they say it's like a bomb that went off in Seattle's hospital. And so then what happens next? Casey and Matt drive to the hospital because Matt knows something is wrong with Andrew. And sure enough, oh yeah, there is. When they arrive to the hospital, seeing chaos in their way with cops and fire stations, there are some lights pointed at the hospital, and Casey questions Matt of why are they there. And then the light goes up as people see figures moving in the air, and it's Andrew and Richard, except he's holding Richard by his foot, and Richard tells him, "You gotta put me down," and that he's sorry, and wah wah wah. But the lines that you really can't hear is what Andrew says unless you have subtitles on. He says, "Your fault, you did this. Your fault, you did this to me." And then he drops Richard, and Richard is caught by Matt, and when Andrew sees this, he flies up into the sky to cause chaos. And I'm not talking about any normal chaos. Oh, no, 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 no. So, the next thing that happens is that Matt brings Richard down, and we don't hear Richard breathing or anything, but every time I come across this question in my head if Richard is dead, since he was passed out, they say no, Richard doesn't die, but in my opinion, I think he does. He wasn't breathing. I think he actually had a heart attack. That's what I'm going to go with. Since we never see Richard ever again in the movie, this is where his character ends. I'm going to count Richard dead. So then, after all of that, Matt and Casey get into the car. And for some reason, Casey is still blogging this. Well, because we need to see the movie. So it's pretty much through her eye perspective now. And then Casey tries to warn Matt as he's driving that there's a helicopter that crashes in front of them, and then a police officer tells them to get off the road now. But the police officer is dragged away and flung back, killing that police officer. And Andrew's not even around. I think, like I said earlier with the whole crystal thing, I think he just got even more powerful and stuff. It's absolutely horrifying, but hey, it is a thriller after all. And again, one of my favorite found footage movies. So after the police officer is flung away and killed, the car starts to lift up, and Casey is scared, and so is Matt. But Matt says to Casey a few times that it's not him, it's Andrew. He says that a few times because he's trying to get the door open. But the car is lifted so far up in the air to where Andrew pretty much aims it at the Seattle Sight Tower. And there, the car hits the tower, and out of nowhere, lights turn on and Andrew is there. He was not there before. If you pay attention in the movie in the dark, he wasn't there before. But then he shows up out of nowhere. And this is one of the scarier parts of the movie. This whole part I'm explaining. So, after that, Matt tries to tell Andrew to stop. But Andrew slowly lifts his arms up and takes off the windshield of the car, unstrapping Matt and pulling him out of the car and letting go of the car so Casey can die. But, however, Matt was able to actually go ahead and escape from Andrew's grasp to save Casey. And he saves Casey by using his telekinetic powers and unstraps her from the car, and her car is now exploded, and Matt takes Casey down to the ground and tells her to stay there. If things couldn't get any more worser, Andrew starts attacking innocent people and hurting them at the Seattle Tower. And now that Matt is trying to get up there, he touches one of Andrew's shoulders, and Andrew flings Matt away. And then Matt catches right back up to him. And then they have a conversation after the glass breaks and many people are scared by this point. Matt is pretty much telling Andrew that he is, that he's hurting a bunch of people and that he doesn't realize it, and Matt sees this. In my opinion, I think he sees that the power is corrupting him. And he tells him to focus for a minute, but Andrew screams at him and says, "Do not tell me what to do." And then Matt's trying to get through to Andrew, but the message just won't hit him because of how far he's gone, because of how far this power has corrupted him. Later on in their conversation, Andrew quietly says that he's the apex predator. Matt screams the word "what," and then Andrew goes towards Matt with an evil, scary look, saying that he's the apex predator. And he hits his cousin with a bus, and then a bunch of destruction starts to happen. But Matt, fortunately, used his protection block power that Andrew taught them at the diner. Remember that? Yeah, So, Andrew flies to a nearby roof and is feeling dizzy, and he vomits, and he's trying to get his bearings. But before that, we can hear Matt scream Andrew's name, and they tackle each other, and they go into a big giant building. And then they hit the ground where we're now in a police officer's view of things. And Andrew lifts the car up and throws the car down, killing those police officers. And then these people named Paul and May says, "Paul, stay away from the window." Paul doesn't listen to this because of how crazy he's blown away by seeing all of this. And then Andrew and Matt goes through their house and a bunch more, and Paul tells May to stay down. A few minutes later, we see that Andrew and Matt are fighting, but Matt, in my opinion, looked like he was actually blocking and trying to talk to Andrew. Because now he's throwing cars at Matt, and Matt is blocking this, in my opinion, because we never see him throw cars at Andrew either. However, Andrew hits a lamppost and lands down and hits a car, and that puts him unconscious as he hits his head more on the pavement. But by the time that Andrew wakes up, Matt is pleading and pretty much begging for help to help his cousin. And these cops are around him, and he's saying, "Please don't shoot. He's not going to do anything." These police officers think that when Andrew wakes up, he lifts his arms up, and the glass starts levitating. Andrew pretty much does this on purpose and pays attention to what's happening. When they think it's Matt because he exposed himself to saving Richard, or I should say that now he's dead, Matt's holding his hands up as well, but the police officer says, take him down, and they shoot a bullet into one of Matt's pinky finger, and he uses his power to get the bullet out. And then Andrew thrusts the cops and their cars on the ground as well, as he screams, leave me alone. And then he takes a lamppost, the one that he hit on since it broke. He breaks it even more since it landed on the ground and throws it at a car. And then Andrew follows Matt everywhere he's going. They smash into buildings over and over, and crazy stuff starts to happen. Now, here's something I'll say for the next part. The next part is that when Andrew gets into some type of plaza area in Seattle, Matt hits his left leg on this statue that's holding a spear, and he falls down and hits his head. He falls unconscious for a few minutes. Andrew, now that they're not tackling each other, Andrew is waving his arms and legs around, and he falls on the ground and rolls over a few times and then falls to where he was at. A bunch of people are recording this while this is all happening in the movie. You can even see it if you pause before these cops show up. And when the cops get out, they waste no time at all. Andrew is telling them to stop, and that he's screaming because of all the pain he's in and everything like that. This is where I want to think that, Andrew is now gone. But I'll explain that in a minute. So, as he's telling the cops to stop, they say stay on the ground, but Andrew doesn't listen because he's dizzy and he's scared. He gets up, he stumbles over a few, and then he puts his arm like this on his eyes. When Matt is awake, he tells Andrew to not hurt them and to not hurt them. And then Matt screams Andrew's name. And while he's scared, since the helicopter light was on him and he's realizing what's happening, is what I like to think anyway, even though he's the apex predator, he stumbles towards the cops and they think that he's trying to attack them. But the cops start shooting bullets at Andrew and he's blocking it like Neo from the Matrix. And they keep shooting him until they run out of ammo, and the cops are shocked by what is happening. And once he's done screaming from blocking the bullets, he screams again and thrusts the cops and the cars and anyone who was around pretty much over on the sides of the road that they were at. And Andrew drops the bullets as well when he thrusts the cars, which is why he attacks the cops. So then, to make things even sadder and much more darker, yes, you heard me. Remember how I said much more darker a few seconds ago? No, man, no. So, Andrew is on his knees and his hand, the apex predator is on his knees and his hands. However, when Matt screams silently, he hears the apex predator screaming and raising his arms up slowly as it starts breaking glass from windows, and Matt is trying to tell him to stop. but he can't get through to him. And while he's telling him to stop over and over, it makes him cry, and then the apex predator does a ultimate scream while he opens his fingers up like this. And Matt is looking around his surroundings since he can't stand right now because his foot's trying to get better from when he hit the statue. So, when he sees a few people blocking all this big giant glass and stuff, he says the words, "Andrew, don't make me do this," and tells him to stop over and over. Like I said, he can't get through to him because that's the apex predator now, and this power has corrupted Andrew completely. And he tells him to stop once more after crying, and then he looks at the statue that they were at. And since he's in a perfect range, Matt looks around and pretty much says, "Screw this." He aims the hand of the statue. Matt aims the hand of the statue that the spear is holding downwards and then forces it into Andrew's chest, killing him. You can even hear his spine break, which was another pretty graphic detail, but it shows this shot twice. And now, the apex predator, aka Andrew, is dead. And as his body is all moving around, all dead-like, Matt is still crying. But now, since he saw the cops coming for him, because of the powers he has, he was pretending that he was sleeping or passed out or whatever. And then when he hears the cops coming to him, before they get to him, one of them says, "Where you going? Wait." Because he jumps up and flies in the sky. And by this point, I want to say that a few months have passed. Because we see that Matt has Andrew's camera, and that he is going to where Andrew always wanted to go to, Tibet. So Matt makes his way to Tibet and puts the camera down, and I want to think that he wants to pretend that Andrew's soul is in the camera, or that he's just talking to him from the afterlife or something like that, or that he's in complete denial still, because when we see Matt's face, his scars are already healed up, so a few months have passed by. And he tells Andrew through the camera that he never got the chance to say that he loved him, and he's going to find out what that thing was down there for Andrew and Steve. And he says, "I don't care how long it takes, I'm going to find answers." And then he says, "You're not a bad person. I know that." And that's absolutely correct. Andrew was not a bad person. He was a person that grew up in a household with an abusive father. And was having that power inside of him after Andrew said, "Don't go down the hole," and that this is stupid. That was foreshadowing for everything I'm saying. But getting onwards to where we are now, we are almost done. Getting onwards to where we are now in the story at the end for a few bits, Matt screams with joy after, well, before he says, "Guess what, you made it," as he tilts the camera over to see Tibet. And you can hear his scream echo louder, and then it gets all quiet. Matt then says, "Isn't it beautiful?" And he says one final goodbye to Andrew and flies away to find answers and to find what happened to his cousin and Steve. And by his cousin, I mean, Andrew. That's what I mean. And once he flies off, there's music of like a really cool soundtrack, but it sounds happy because then we see the words Chronicle with the static and everything. And that is why Chronicle is darker than you think. Even though that Chronicle is one of my favorite found footage movies to this day, I count it as a really messed up and a very, very dark story of a found footage thriller. But that's it. That is it. I didn't want to put all the details in because I was realizing earlier in this video that I was putting too much detail in, so I skipped over a few things. But for the fans of Chronicle that have watched the movie and have seen it, I hope you liked this video or at least enjoyed it. I was thinking about making one of my manga stories that has already been made, but saying why it's a dark story. But we'll do that a different time. I hope everybody has enjoyed this video. I want to give a ultimate shout out to Lazy Gaming 7780. Again, feel free to check out his channel, his content. You might just enjoy it. A lot of gaming content. He's an amazing friend, and I am supporting him all the time when I get the chance to put likes on his videos and support him even more. You're doing great, my friend. You're doing very great. So Ultimate Plus shout out goes to Lazy Gaming 7780. And then my channel gets the Ultimate Plus shout out as well because we've gained new members that said yes to us. Again, we give optional choices. People don't necessarily have to if they don't want to, and if they want to support the channel and become a part of the community, then that is actually fantastic. That's very, very cool. But it's their choice at the end of the day, you know? So, and our channel here is doing very good, very well, and I appreciate all the support. I really do. I appreciate it. So, without a further ado, it is now time to say that I hope everyone is having a fantastic day out there and staying safe. Having a fantastic day, afternoon, evening, and night. That's amazing. I know I did today. But that's amazing if everyone is. And if you're staying safe as well. And without another... Yes, I'm just going to do this because I want to say it. Without another further ado, I'll see all of you in the next one of new, awesome, epic content coming to the channel in general. See everyone out there. Peace out for now. Bye. And bye-bye. I almost got that mixed up. And this is why Chronicle is a dark story.